When you make the decision to put God first, you are making a statement about who truly holds authority in your life. You are acknowledging that He is not a backup plan, not a weekend priority, and not a voice you call on only when everything falls apart. He is the source, the origin of your strength, your wisdom, and your direction. Life has a way of pulling us into the illusion that we are in control, that our success, our effort, and our intelligence are the ultimate factors that shape our outcomes. But when you take an honest look at life, you realize that human effort alone can't sustain peace, can't guarantee purpose, and can't secure the future. That's why putting God first isn't about religion. It's about alignment. It's about saying, God, before I build, before I move, before I speak, I want your hand to guide me. When you make Him your source, something shifts within you. Your priorities begin to rearrange themselves. Suddenly, success doesn't mean having it all. It means honoring God with all I have. You stop chasing validation from people who can't fill your spirit, and you start finding peace in the one who already called you worthy. You stop building your identity on the unstable foundation of opinions, likes, and recognition, and you begin to build it on the unshakable truth of His word. Because when God is your source, your identity no longer depends on what's happening around you. It depends on what's happening within you. See, when you treat God as a supplement, you only invite Him into certain parts of your life, the parts that feel spiritual or safe. But when He becomes your source, He influences everything. Your work, your relationships, your finances, your mindset, your habits. You stop compartmentalizing faith and start living it. You start praying not just for results, but for wisdom. You start trusting that His no is as powerful as His yes, because both are leading you towards something greater. Putting God first doesn't mean you abandon responsibility or stop making plans. It means your plans are submitted to His authority. It means you invite Him to sit in the driver's seat rather than the passenger's. It means you stop saying, God, bless what I'm doing, and start saying, God, lead me to what you're blessing. That small shift changes everything. Because when you depend on your own strength, your results are limited to your own ability. But when you depend on God, your results are tied to His limitless power. There's peace in knowing that you don't have to hold everything together. There's freedom in realizing that the weight of the world doesn't rest on your shoulders. When you make God the source, you allow Him to fill the spaces that fear, pride, and control once occupied. You learn to trust that He knows what's best, even when the path doesn't make sense. You stop trying to manipulate outcomes and start walking in faith. And in time, you begin to see the beauty of His order, how He aligns people, moments, and opportunities to work together for your good. Putting God first is not a one-time decision, it's a daily posture. It's waking up each morning and saying, God, I need you to lead me today. I can't do this without you. And the beautiful truth is, when you live like that, when you treat Him as the source, not the supplement, He will handle what you can't. He will strengthen what feels weak, provide where there is lack, and bring peace where there was once pressure. That's the power of divine order. Everything begins to fall into place when God is first. When you put God first, something begins to happen that goes far beyond what the human eye can see. Your life starts to align with divine order. It's not that your problems disappear, but your perspective begins to shift. You start to see that what once felt chaotic is being guided by a hand much greater than your own. When you invite God into the center of your life, You give him permission to bring order out of confusion, peace out of anxiety, and purpose out of uncertainty. That's what divine alignment is. It's when heaven's order starts shaping your earthly steps. Many people live in constant tension, pulled between what they want and what they know is right. Their hearts are full of desire, but their direction is unclear. That confusion often comes from misalignment, when our priorities, plans, or emotions are out of sync with God's will. Just like a car can't drive straight when its wheels are out of alignment, a person can't move forward smoothly when their spirit isn't aligned with their Creator. Putting God first is how you bring everything back into alignment. It's how you let His word, His timing, and His wisdom guide the flow of your life. When divine order steps in, chaos loses its grip. The storms may still come, but you'll notice something. Your peace won't depend on calm weather anymore. You'll have peace in the middle of the storm because you know who's in control of the wind. You'll stop trying to fight every battle in your own strength and instead learn to rest in the truth that God's plan is not confusion, but clarity. He knows the path you can't see. He knows where every detour leads. And when your steps are aligned with His purpose, even delays are divine. Alignment doesn't mean perfection. It means positioning. It means making sure your heart is in the right place before you move. It means checking your motives, asking, am I doing this to glorify God or to glorify myself? It means choosing obedience even when it costs you comfort, because you trust that God's order always produces better outcomes than your shortcuts. When you are aligned with God, your choices start to reflect His character. You start to speak differently, love differently, work differently, and even handle pain differently. You can feel when your life is aligned. There's a calmness that doesn't come from your circumstances, but from your connection. You make decisions with peace instead of panic. You stop rushing and start trusting. You stop forcing and start flowing, because alignment allows you to operate from a place of faith instead of fear. The same situation that once made you anxious now becomes an opportunity for God to reveal His faithfulness. That's what happens when you put Him first. He brings divine rhythm to your steps. And the truth is, when divine order enters your life, even the things that once felt like setbacks become setups. God uses them to realign your focus and redirect your energy toward what truly matters. He takes what was scattered and gathers it. He takes what was broken and restores it. He takes what was confusing and gives it meaning. That's why alignment is powerful. It doesn't remove the challenges, but it ensures you face them from a place of purpose, not panic. So when you feel lost or overwhelmed, don't just pray for change, pray for alignment. Ask God to bring your heart, your thoughts, and your steps back under His order. Because when your life is in alignment with Him, confusion loses authority, anxiety loses space, and chaos loses control. That's the beauty of divine order. Once you put God first, everything else starts to fall into its proper place. Every heart was created to worship something. Whether we realize it or not, we all give our devotion, our time, and our energy to what we value most. The problem begins when we place something or someone above God. That's when idols are formed, not statues or images, but priorities that silently take His place. It could be success, a relationship, approval, wealth, or even our own sense of control. Anything that captures your heart more than God becomes an idol, and idols always demand more than they give. They promise fulfillment, but they leave you empty. They promise peace, but they drain your spirit. That's why putting God first isn't just about obedience, it's about freedom. It's about tearing down anything that tries to compete with his place in your life. When God is first, everything else is safe. But when something else takes his place, that thing is destined to crumble under the weight of expectations it was never built to carry. A career can't carry your soul. A relationship can't heal your spirit. Money can't give you peace. These things have their place, but they are not meant to sit on the throne of your heart. When you put them before God, they become unstable foundations, and when life shakes, they fall apart. But when God is first, he stabilizes everything connected to you. He blesses your work, strengthens your relationships, and gives meaning to what you have. There's a reason why Scripture tells us to seek first the kingdom of God, because whatever comes first determines what follows. If you put worry first, you'll live in fear. If you put people first, you'll live in disappointment. But if you put God first, you'll live in alignment with peace, purpose, and power. God doesn't want your leftovers. He wants your first and your best. Not because he's selfish, but because he knows that your heart is safest when it belongs fully to him. When you remove idols, you make room for God's presence to dwell freely in your life. That's when transformation begins. The things that used to control you lose their power. The things that used to define you no longer do. When you worship God above all else, you stop being enslaved to what the world says you need. You become free to live in the purpose he designed for you. You learn to enjoy blessings without being bound by them, to love people without idolizing them, and to work hard without worshiping success. That's true freedom. When God sits on the throne, everything else serves its proper purpose. Sometimes God will allow certain things to fall apart just to remind you that they were never meant to be your foundation. When that happens, don't see it as punishment. See it as mercy. Because when idols fall, it's an invitation to rebuild your life with him at the center. God won't compete for your attention. He'll wait for your surrender. And when you return to him, when you make him first again, he restores what was broken in a way that's stronger than before. Putting God first doesn't mean you reject success, relationships, or goals. It means you put them in the right order. You allow him to guide your pursuit instead of your desires controlling it. You ask him, is this your will? Does this glorify you? That's how you protect your heart from drifting into idolatry. Because when God is first, every blessing has balance, every dream has direction, and every plan has purpose. So take a look at your life and ask yourself, what's sitting on the throne of my heart? If it's not God, it's time to rearrange. Because when he stands first, idols fall naturally. And when idols fall, blessings flow freely. The peace you've been searching for, the clarity you've been praying for, the strength you've been needing, all of it begins when you return to putting God first. When it comes to putting God first, one of the greatest lessons we must learn is the difference between obedience and control. Too often, we try to take God's promises and fit them into our own plans. We want his blessings, but we also want to decide when, how, and through whom they come. But true faith begins when we release our grip and choose obedience over understanding. Our job is to follow what God says. His job is to produce the outcome. When we obey, we align our actions with heaven's order, and that's when miracles begin to happen. Obedience opens doors that striving never can. You see, obedience is not always glamorous or convenient. Sometimes it means walking into uncertainty with nothing but trust. Sometimes it means doing the right thing when no one else understands why. It can feel slow, uncomfortable, and even risky. But obedience is never wasted. When God asks you to move, even if you don't know where he's leading, there's a reason. He sees what you can't see. He's arranging things behind the scenes, preparing people and opportunities you haven't met yet. Your obedience activates what his power has already prepared. When you depend on your own understanding, you limit what God can do through you. Human reasoning can only see what's visible, but faith moves based on what's invisible. God's instructions often won't make sense at first because they are designed to stretch your faith, not your logic. Think about it. If everything made sense, you wouldn't need faith at all. But when you obey despite uncertainty, you show God that you trust his heart, even when you don't understand his hand. That's when he begins to move in ways you couldn't imagine. There's a pattern in life. Obedience always precedes the blessing. The walls of Jericho didn't fall because of human strength. They fell because of obedience. Peter didn't catch a boatload of fish because of his fishing skills. It happened because he obeyed when Jesus said, "Cast your net on the other side." The miracle of provision, protection, and purpose always starts with a moment of surrender. Yes, when everything in you wants to say, how? Obedience positions you for divine outcomes because it shifts the burden of results from your shoulders to God's. When you obey, you are declaring that you trust God's timing more than your own. You're saying, "Lord, I may not see how this will work, but I know you do." And that kind of faith is powerful. It pleases God. It attracts his presence. It releases his favor. When you live in obedience, you no longer have to manipulate situations to get your way because you know God's way is better. You stop chasing validation, stop stressing over what's next, and start resting in the truth that the outcome is his responsibility. Sometimes obedience will cost you comfort, but it will always produce growth. It will stretch your patience, test your humility, and require sacrifice. But every time you choose obedience, you plant a seed of faith that will grow into something far greater than what you gave up. God never wastes an act of obedience. Even when you don't see immediate results, he's working through your yes. Every closed door, every delay, every redirection, they all carry divine purpose when your heart is submitted to him. So stop worrying about outcomes that only God can control. Stop analyzing every detail of what he already promised to handle. Just obey. Trust that. If he told you to move, he'll make a way. If he told you to wait, there's something he's protecting or preparing. When you live with that kind of trust, your faith becomes unshakable because you're no longer depending on your plan. You're depending on his power. That's what it means to put God first. You obey fully and let him handle the rest. There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize that striving alone isn't enough. You can work hard, plan carefully, and do everything right, yet still feel empty, restless, or stuck. That's because human effort has limits, but divine strength does not. Surrendering to God is not a sign of weakness. It's a declaration of trust. It's saying, "God, I've done all I can, and now I'm giving you the rest." When you surrender, you're not giving up. You're giving it over. You're handing your burdens, your battles, and your outcomes to the one who can actually handle them. That's when the power of God begins to move in ways that your strength never could. Striving is exhausting because it puts the weight of control on your shoulders. It keeps you in a cycle of pressure, trying to fix what's broken, force what's not ready, and hold together what's falling apart. Surrender, on the other hand, brings rest. It allows you to breathe again. It reminds you that you were never meant to carry the whole load. You were meant to depend on the one who can see the bigger picture. When you surrender, you invite peace into the places where anxiety once ruled. You let go of the illusion that you can control everything, and instead, you choose faith over fear. The truth is, God can do more with your surrender than you can ever do with your striving. When you let go, you make room for Him to work. When you stop fighting for control, He begins fighting for you. Sometimes God is waiting for you to release what's in your hands so He can place something better there. But as long as you keep holding on, you can't receive what He's trying to give. That's why surrender is not the end of your effort. It's the redirection of it. It means you still work, but from a place of trust rather than tension. You still move forward, but you do it with peace, knowing God is guiding every step. Surrender doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing the right thing with the right heart. It's about obedience without anxiety, faith without fear, and effort without ego. You keep showing up, but you stop trying to force results. You plant the seeds, but you trust God to bring the rain. You stop measuring your success by what you can see today and start believing that God is working even when it's hidden. That's when miracles begin. Not when you're pushing the hardest, but when you're trusting the deepest. Sometimes surrender feels like loss because you're letting go of what's familiar. You might be releasing a dream, a plan, or a person. But what you don't see yet is that surrender often creates space for God to bring something better. You're not losing control. You're transferring it to the one who knows how to handle it perfectly. The moment you surrender, you shift from stress to strength because now the outcome depends on God, not you. He can take what looks like a setback and turn it into a setup. He can take what seemed like an ending and make it a new beginning. When you surrender, your faith matures. You stop needing every answer before you move. You stop doubting every delay. You stop panicking every time something doesn't go your way. You start trusting that even the waiting has purpose. You realize that surrender is not giving up, it's growing up spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. It's recognizing that peace is found not in control, but in confidence that God is working all things together for your good. So stop striving to make everything perfect. Stop exhausting yourself trying to fix what only God can. Rest in the truth that when you surrender, you don't lose. You gain peace, perspective, and divine partnership. You step out of your own way and let God take His rightful place. And once He does, you'll see that surrender was never a setback. It was the beginning of His greatest work in you. When you make the decision to prioritize God above everything else, something powerful begins to happen. Peace enters places that once held anxiety, and purpose begins to flow where confusion once lived. Life doesn't suddenly become easy, but it becomes directed. When God is first, you stop wandering aimlessly and start walking intentionally. Every choice, every relationship, and every challenge starts to make sense within the bigger picture of His plan. You begin to understand that true peace doesn't come from a life without problems. It comes from knowing you're not walking through them alone. When God holds first place in your life, your perspective changes. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is God trying to teach me through this?" That's when peace replaces panic. You begin to see that even in the hardest seasons, there's purpose. The closed doors, the delays, the detours, they're not random, they're divine. They're shaping you for something greater, something beyond your immediate understanding. When you live with God as your priority, you begin to trust that nothing is wasted. Every experience becomes part of his process of refining you. Putting God first also shifts how you handle success and struggle. When things are going well, you stay humble because you know it's his favor, not just your effort, that brought you there. And when life feels heavy, you remain steady because your foundation isn't built on circumstances, it's built on faith. That's what it means to live with peace and purpose. You're not tossed around by every emotion or situation. You live anchored in the confidence that God is guiding your steps even when you can't see the full path. Peace doesn't come from control, it comes from trust. And when you prioritize God, that trust grows stronger. You stop trying to figure out every detail and start resting in his timing. You realize that he's not late. He's strategic. He knows when to open the right doors and when to close the wrong ones. You may not always understand his methods, but you can always trust his heart. That trust produces an unexplainable calm, a peace that doesn't depend on what's happening around you, but on who's holding you together inside. And purpose, real purpose, is born from that same relationship. It's not found by chasing success or comparing yourself to others. It's found by staying close to God. When you put him first, he reveals your why. You start to see that your life has meaning beyond the surface, that your pain has purpose, and your gifts have assignment. God begins to use your story, your voice, and your experiences to impact others in ways you never expected. You stop living just to survive and start living to serve. You wake up with direction because you know your life is part of something eternal. When God is first, everything else takes its rightful place. Worry loses power, fear loses influence, and confusion loses its voice. You begin to live from peace instead of for peace. You walk with confidence, not because everything is perfect, but because you know who's in control. Even in uncertainty, you can rest because you've placed your life in the hands of the one who never fails. So if you've been restless, anxious, or searching for meaning, it may not be that your life needs more. It may be that your priorities need realignment. Put God first, and you'll find what you've been missing. Peace will settle your heart, and purpose will guide your steps. Because when he is first, you stop living in reaction to the world and start living in rhythm with heaven. That's when your life becomes steady, full, and truly free. Not because everything is easy, but because God is at the center of it all.